in Sydney. And Nick, Julia Gillard comes from the left of the party. Can we expect any changes to the party position?
She does come from the left of the party, but to be honest, she's moved to the centre in recent years. She's a pragmatist, much like the man she has now replaced. We will see one crucial change, I think. Kevin Rudd had introduced proposals for a super mining tax on the super profits of the mining giants. He wanted the Australian people to get a bigger share of their revenue. It's been a huge point of contention here. One of the reasons why he was ousted was because the mining companies have launched such a massive campaign against him, which has hammered the Labour Party in resources-rich states like Western Australia and Queensland. Julia Gillard said from the very outset that that proposal is now open to compromise. She wants to negotiate with the mining companies. And that's key, because a lot of Australians think that the prosperity of their country would be imperilled if the tax is levied against the mines.
OK, thank you very much indeed, Nick Bryant, our correspondent in Sydney. And of course, lots more about the new Australian Prime Minister on the BBC website. Now, BP says it's repaired a containment cap that's collecting some of the oil leaking into the Gulf of Mexico. An underwater robot hit one of the cap's vents and it had to be removed for repair. The accident had led to a fresh surge of hundreds of thousands of litres of oil into the ocean. A meeting of the regulatory body for the international diamond trade has failed to reach a consensus on whether to lift restrictions on the sale of diamonds from Zimbabwe. Many experts believe Zimbabwe's Marangi field has the potential to transform its ailing economy, but government opponents say its development has been marred by smuggling, land seizures and wide-scale violence against local people. The US internet giant Google has won a landmark case in an American court over claims its internationally popular YouTube video site flouts copyright law. Media company Viacom had sought $1 billion in damages, claiming Google had done nothing to prevent tens of thousands of copyright videos being uploaded onto YouTube illegally. But the judge ruled that YouTube acts quickly to remove illegal videos, so hadn't infringed copyright laws. Viacom says it'll appeal. Public sector workers in France are expected to join a series of strikes today which will affect transport, education and state administrations across the country. Trades unions have called the strikes in protest against government plans to reform the pension system and raise the minimum retirement age from 60 to 62. These are hard times for many countries, and in our series here on BBC World News we're looking at the impact from Paris. Here's our correspondent Christian Fraser.
Well, thousands of people expected to take to the streets of Paris today in protest at the government's new pension bill that will raise the retirement age from 60 to 62. Really the first major step that the government has taken to trim the enormous public deficit here in France. Throughout the day, as part of our Hard Time series on BBC World, we'll be giving you the reaction and the analysis to those protests. But I want to introduce you first of all, if I could, to Denis Chambard, who wrote a book titled Our Children Will Never Forgive Us. You better explain, Denis, first of all, the premise to that title.
Yes, I wrote this book 4 years ago, and the situation was already very difficult. It was my point of view. So because the deficit in France it's a very long story. It started in the middle of the 70s, you know, in 1974 exactly, with the first government of Jacques Chirac. So we lived in this situation since 36 years. And so you're saying we are alone in Europe to live like that.
And are you saying now that it's time for the French to pay back for the good times it's had? Because this is a country renowned for its 35-hour week, the working lunches, long holidays. We're in the age of austerity now.
Yes, but you know, it's a very rich country, so it's very difficult to explain why we have not been conscious before. But the international crisis put the country at the foot of the wall. You know, the reality is now in the mind of the French. So we can imagine that today we will have a lot of people in the street. But I think that the French people are now conscious of the situation, not only on the retirement, which is a question of the day, but about the global economical situation of France.
So economically a necessity, but politically disastrous for a president that is already looking towards 2012 and the elections.
I think that the people can accept a new bill about the retirement and the pensions, but the question is to find a law which will be fair, and I think it's the real question. I think that French people can accept a new law but they want that the law will be fair.
Well, very much the debate across Europe. Denis Jambard, author of Our Children Will Never Forgive Us, thank you very much indeed. We don't know how many people are going to come out onto the streets of Paris today, but we will watch it very closely. The government doesn't look as if it's likely to back down, so we could be in for a summer of strikes here in France, and that could be very painful for President Nicolas Sarkozy.
Tough times indeed. Sally's going to be having some more on the tough times facing so many
France,
countries around the world, particularly France today. But also what you're dealing with today is China taking what seems to be another big step into a market economy.
Yeah, a very symbolic move from old communism to new capitalism going on in China. Agricultural Bank of China is starting its big roadshow today to try and generate interest in what will be a massive market flotation when it comes to the market. It's hoping to raise huge amounts of money, but this bank was sort of kicked off by Chairman Mao back in the 1950s. I mean, it was a bank that provided finance for the Chinese masses, and now it's going to be a bank that will be looking at profits and balance sheets and banking bonuses. So we're going to be looking at that in World Business Report.
And explain why President Medvedev has become the first. Is he a tweeter or a Twitterer?
He did a tweet.
He
sent his first tweet message on Twitter. Does that make him a Twitterer or a tweeter? I have no idea. But he, as we all know, has been touring Silicon Valley, and he's been very impressed by what he's seen. Cisco's done a big deal with the Russian president. He's now headed to Washington. We're going to look at his trip and his ambitions to try and replicate what's in Silicon Valley to just west of Moscow.
All right, thank you very much indeed, Sarah. See you in about 20 minutes or so with World Business Report. You're with BBC World News. Still to come.
I'm David Eads in South Africa for the World Cup. In a moment, turn down the volume, pump up the commentary. Even the Glastonbury Festival stops for England as the fans endure their latest World Cup ordeal.
Let's have a look now at some of the main stories around the UK this morning. And the government will today announce it's bringing forward by 8 years plans to raise the state pension age for men to 66. The age for women will be moved to the same age a few years later. Ministers will also open up the possibility of people working into their 70s and beyond.
This will be the first big announcement by the coalition team running pensions policy, the Secretary of State Ian Duncan Smith and the Pensions Minister Steve Webb. They'll say they want to legislate soon for the state pension age for men to be raised to 66 from 2016. Women will be moved up to that level a few years later. The previous government's policy was to raise the pension age to 66 in 2024 and then gradually to 68 by 2046. The new ministers will open up the possibility of a faster move in that direction, perhaps as high as 70 and beyond. They'll argue that as people live longer, there's a need to, in their words, reinvigorate retirement. In essence, work for as long as you want to. The government also wants to scrap the default retirement age, which even with age discrimination legislation allows employers at the moment to shed staff at the age of 65. Hugh Pym, BBC News.
David Cameron is writing to 6 million public sector employees, asking them to suggest where cuts can be made. They'll be encouraged to visit the Treasury's website, where they'll be able to identify areas where money is wasted or could be used better. Most government departments are being expected to cut costs by 25%. Police in Greater Manchester say they're determined to catch a man who spent the last year and a half plaguing them with hundreds of hoax calls. They warn lives are being put in danger by the prankster who sings and raps down the line. Fire brigade bosses say the problem of fake calls is getting worse. Waiting lists for sex offenders to get treatment in England and Wales are unacceptably long, according to the police and probation inspectorates. A new report says some staff are overstretched and undertrained, but it also found that protection teams were getting better at rehabilitating offenders living on licence in the community. Sinn Féin have criticised plans for the Queen to visit Dublin next year. The trip would be the first time a British monarch has visited the Irish Republic since before it gained independence in 1922. It said no official welcome should be given until there's complete withdrawal of the British military and British administration from Ireland.